I spotted my father, 15 years after his death, when I went to Goa for my honeymoon. I almost froze when I knew the truth. I am Samantha Dawson, recently became Samantha Blake after marrying my sweetheart, Daniel. This is another thrilling story by S.A. Spencer, author of The Pink Mutiny and The Black Waters. Please watch till the end to find out the unbelievable that happened to my dad. If you enjoyed the story, kindly remember to subscribe and follow us. Additionally, please like and share the story to support us in sharing more similar stories and brightening your day with smiles. When I was 10 years old, I tragically lost my mother. Since my dad had no other family members, my grandma stepped in to help raise me. She would occasionally act as a babysitter even though I was no longer a baby. My dad, who was a businessman, once went swimming in the sea and never returned. Unfortunately, his body was never recovered. This sudden loss left me as an orphan. My grandmother received calls from people claiming that my dad owed them money. Dad had taken out multiple loans for his business, which was struggling, and he found himself in debt. Some even accused him of taking his own life to evade the debts. Eventually, the bank repossessed Dad's house. Since then, I have never laid eyes on the place where I spent my early childhood. However, Dad had life insurance, and grandmother kept the insurance money a secret from the creditors. Thanks to the life insurance money Grandma received as my guardian, after Dad's death, we didn't face any financial issues during my upbringing. When I started dating Daniel Blake, Grandma advised me to start looking for a house. Thankfully, the insurance money, after being used for my education, was sufficient to buy a property for me. Daniel and I moved into our new house in Sydney, all thanks to Dad's foresight. In less than a year, we exchanged vows. I went from being Samantha Dawson to Mrs. Samantha Blake. My father, who had been adopted from India, instilled in me a deep desire to visit his birth country. Daniel suggested, "Sam, why don't we have our honeymoon in India? I've heard that Goa is a stunning destination with numerous sandy beaches." My smile was enough to give him the answer. Intrigued, Daniel then asked, "Do you know the exact place where your dad was born?" My smile quickly faded as I replied, "Daniel, even my dad himself didn't know. He was very young when his adoptive mother, a single woman, brought him home and showered him with love." Daniel and I boarded a flight to Mumbai and then to Goa. I remembered the time when I asked my dad about his place of birth. All he could recall was the sea beach and the many foreigners who used to visit. "I don't think you understand how society works here," Daniel interjected. "It's not uncommon for unwed mothers to abandon their children, as it is considered socially unacceptable. It's quite possible that your father's mother is still alive and married to someone other than his biological dad." His words got me thinking. "Daniel, this is supposed to be our honeymoon. I don't want to turn it into a search operation in a country with a population of 1.4 billion people." We had booked a luxurious, 5-star resort that had its very own private beach. One afternoon, as my partner Daniel and I were strolling along the beach, my attention was captured by a couple nearby. The man bore a striking resemblance to my father, causing me to freeze in place. Concerned, Daniel inquired, "Sam, what's wrong?" I pointed out the man, standing with the woman, and exclaimed, "He looks exactly like my dad." Since Daniel had never met my father, I showed him a photo of him on my phone. After contemplating for a moment, Daniel responded, "Sam, you haven't seen your dad in 15 years. This man can be a doppelganger." Deep in thought, we made our way back to our room. The two of us were enjoying the sunset over the Arabian Sea from the balcony of our room when we noticed the same couple passing by our cottage. Daniel turned to me and said, "Sam, I have a feeling that your dad isn't actually dead. It seems like his death was a carefully planned scheme. After all, the police couldn't find his body in the ocean, right?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Daniel, you sound more like a detective than a doctor. The police officially declared my dad as deceased. They suggested that his body may have been consumed by sea creatures." Daniel replied, "That's exactly what your dad wanted everyone to believe, and it worked. He was in deep debt, and his business was failing. Your grandmother didn't have to repay his loan, and she also received enough money to raise you. In essence, he took care of everything for you, except being a father, and he fled to India, his birth country, to marry a much younger woman. He truly accomplished 3 goals with 1 move." The couple strolled through the garden. "Dan, look," I exclaimed. "My dad passed away 15 years ago, yet this woman appears much younger than him. She could be my age, or even younger. It's incredible, my stepmom is practically my contemporary." Daniel chuckled. "Your dad is truly living it up here. He probably remarried after arriving 15 years ago, and now he has a younger wife." My curiosity intensified as thoughts about that man consumed me. I momentarily forgot about our honeymoon and resolved to uncover more about him. As we approached the couple, we discovered that they hailed from a small town in the state of Maharashtra. Interestingly, the man seemed to feign unfamiliarity with me. Daniel, standing beside me, whispered, "He's pretending not to recognize you, the daughter he left behind." Smiling, I whispered back, "It's been 15 years since I was a teenage girl, now I'm a grown woman." As we conversed, we learned that the man's name was Munish, and that his elderly parents were still alive, residing in the same house, where Munish and his new wife now lived. Daniel said, "Congratulations, Mr. Munish, on your 3rd marriage." Munish smiled and replied, "Actually, it's my 2nd marriage, not the 3rd. My first wife passed away last year, and I have a 12-year-old daughter." Daniel then interjected, "Mr. Munish, I am currently working on a thesis about the family structure in India. If you don't mind, would it be possible for us to meet your parents and have a conversation with them?" To our surprise, Munish not only agreed, but also provided us with their address. He even called them and informed that an Australian couple wanted to meet them. Their hometown was Sawantwadi, a place near the border of Maharashtra and Goa. Wasting no time, Daniel and I decided to visit Sawantwadi the following day, before Munish could fully enjoy his honeymoon. We rented a car, drove to Sawantwadi, and arrived there by afternoon. Munish's parents, Kamla and Nitin, greeted us at the door. They invited us to their lounge room and served us kokum juice. In a hushed voice, I whispered to Daniel, when the couple wasn't around, "Should I ask the lady if she could be my grandmother?" Daniel nudged me and replied, "Don't be so naive. Your dad's mother abandoned him because he was born out of wedlock, which is still considered taboo here. She will never admit it, as her husband would doubt her. If we can somehow find out the year his son was born, we might get some clues." During our conversation with Kamla and Nitin, I mentioned my dad was adopted from an orphanage in India. I've always wanted to visit his actual birthplace. Nidin responded, "Unless you have the name and address of the orphanage, it will be challenging to locate it." To be honest, I didn't know. All I knew was that his mother had abandoned him, and he was discovered as a baby on the side of the road by a kind-hearted Samaritan. We attempted various methods to determine whether Munish, their son, had returned from Australia to establish himself in India. However, we discovered Munish was approximately 10 years younger than my dad. Daniel suggested, "Sam, we should return and search for old records pertaining to your dad. It would be helpful to know the name and location of the orphanage before proceeding with our investigation. Asking individuals in a country with a population of 1.4 billion seems futile." I am about to reach the most interesting part of the story. Meanwhile, did you know the Pink Mutiny is now free on Amazon, and the Black Waters is on sale at the lowest price possible? You can get the link in the description box below, or the first comment to the video. We returned to Goa and settled on the balcony of the cottage, each of us holding a wine glass. It was then that my grandmother called out, "Good news, Sam. Finally, we are getting closer to finding some answers." Curious, I asked, "What is it, Grandma?" She responded, "The police have found your dad's remains. It turns out, he didn't drown in the sea, but rather, died in a mangrove. Somehow, the remains were discovered, and a DNA test confirmed they belonged to your dad. They are now investigating whether this was a murder or just an accident." Daniel and I paused our drinking and exchanged glances. I had this unnecessary suspicion that Dad was playing a game with me, faking his death to escape his debts. It feels like God took him away from me. We made a mutual decision to simply enjoy the remainder of our honeymoon without dwelling too much on things that were beyond our control. Now, what? Let us complete our honeymoon. Then, I will bring another interesting story for you. Meanwhile, stay healthy and stay blessed.